Welcome everyone to another episode of Cinematic Realms. I'm your host, John Webster, and joining me once again, coming up for the second time, is Sydney from Trial by Stone, the Dark Crystal podcast. How are you doing, Sydney?
I'm so excited to be talking about something else. And don't get me wrong, I could talk about Dark Crystal for the rest of my life easily, and it's not a problem. However, the first love in my soul from the time that I was a literal fetus is Tim Burton films. And I don't get to geek out about Tim Burton films in a forum like this nearly enough. So I'm just like, yes, let me just open the box in my head and all of it's going to come pouring out. And someone's letting me. So I'm very excited.
I think that's been one of the most sort of joyful things that I've discovered about having this channel and doing these discussions is that there have been people in, like, for instance, the Game of Thrones fan community of which I'm a part, who I've been wanted to meet and talk to. And I said, and I found out that they're like into a certain movie, and I'm like, would you maybe like to come on and talk about this? And they're like, yes, absolutely, because sometimes you want to talk about things that are outside of your wheelhouse, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. But the thing is that what a lot of the listeners for the Dark Crystal podcast don't realize that Tim Burton movies are 100% my wheelhouse. I'm just not normally in it. Nobody's like hired me to be in it yet. And spoiler alert for future content, but I am shaping my own like separate project right now for YouTube that is just going to be me. Hi, here be dragons. Thank you. Miss Frost, that's so fancy.
By the way, I just wanted to tell you that after you and Phil were on in last time, which all due deference to Phil, like, he's absolutely amazing. But I remember specifically there were people who were in the chat and then afterwards in our Slack group who were like, that Sydney is just adorable. I love her.
Oh man, that's so nice. Thank you. If any of you people who are there yet who said those things, and if you haven't said those things, well, I'm gonna try to convince you to love me too, I guess. This is the place to do it. That's so sweet. Yeah.
Which apologies, Phil, if you're watching this. I love you to death, and thank
Phil is
you
a charming cinnamon roll, and I don't want to hear any word otherwise.
He's great. Yeah. Like I said this last time, but I just love listening to you guys geek out on Dark Crystal, and it's become like part of my fan experience.
That's so awesome. I really appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, and without going on a Dark Crystal tangent too much, because I really am here for the Tim Burton love. One of the coolest things about being part of the Dark Crystal podcast is that I'm meeting all of these people who I wished existed, or who obviously they did exist. Yeah, you didn't just apparate out of the ether, but who I didn't know existed my whole entire life, thinking I was like the only freaking person I knew who liked this weird puppet movie, and nobody else knew what I was talking about. And now it's like, oh, you are all here. You do exist. Cool. Nice. I'm slightly validated, or actually very validated. And people actually are, because even if there were just 3 people out there listening to the podcast regularly, that would be enough for me to keep doing it, to be like, because I know that those 3 people felt the way I felt my whole life, not knowing that there were 3 other people. But as it turns out, there's a lot more than 3, and that's very exciting.
Yeah, I mean, it's the best part about, like, I know you're not on Twitter, but there are, and there are a lot of things to dislike about Twitter. But I will say that I met the people who are now my friends and my family through Twitter, and so it's just amazing how your world can expand.
Yeah.
Through something like that, and and I confessed last time you were on here about you said if you think I don't already know about the Knights of Kira, you've got another thing coming. But the great thing was that, like, it started off with 2 other people who were like, who got that part of me. Yeah. And that's just a weird thing about the internet, that you can find people who will allow you to wave your fan flag for the things that you didn't think you could. So
there's if it exists, someone on the internet is being loud about it.
Yeah.
Whether you like it or not. If a thing exists, there's a corner of the internet for that thing. Sometimes that's awesome. Sometimes it's weird. But it can be very awesome when it's awesome. So
yeah. All right. So I'm not going to waste any more time because we need to get into the topic at hand, which is this movie, Batman Returns. And I just want to say this is one of my favorite posters ever.
Yep.
Which is, it's weird because it really is just what we call today. And, you know, when we talk about marketing, it's a floating heads poster, you know,
Yes,
but something about the way it's composed with the imagery and stuff. I loved it when the movie first came out, and I love it now.
Well, it's in its defense, it is floating heads, but also floating claws at the same time. Yes. And also penguins with rockets. I find me another floating heads poster where there are penguins with rockets. I dare you. I almost made a joke earlier about how, we're not here for March of the Penguins. I prepared wrong, but I'm too excited. Yeah, I am. I have on display. Yeah, your favorite part is the penguin, but is your favorite part the real penguins or the puppet penguins? Because that, my friend, is a true highlight.
It all comes back around.
Those Stan Winston puppets. Now, they're not Jim Henson puppets, but Stan Winston is every bit as excellent, just in different ways. And those are some impressive, gigantic penguin puppets that they crafted at the Stan Winston Studios. So yeah, that poster, I don't know if you remember, there was another one that was very, very similar, but it just said the bat, the cat, the penguin, yeah. That Batman Returns. And that one sticks out in my head too, because that one was the one that was at like bus stops and like billboards and stuff. And there were, I remember at old like video stores, in my opinion, the best Batman, the camp totally works for it. We're going to get into that. I have some thoughts about camp. So yeah, I remember at a lot of the video stores, remember those from when I was younger. And even though I was only 2 when Batman Returns came out, for the next several years at like video rental stores and whatnot, they had posters up for it all over the place. And the bat, the cat, the penguin, and then the floating heads and floating claws, penguins with rockets poster that we just saw. And then fun little factoid, one of 1,000 that I'm going to share, but there was one the year that the movie came out where it was on bus stops and it was of just Catwoman. And a lot of people that year were vandalizing, stealing that poster from bus stops. It was like a whole thing where they actually had a specialized like faction of what police were doing that year to go around and like make sure that people weren't like stealing Catwoman posters, because so many people were doing it. And now that specific poster, if you can find it, it's worth an insane amount of money. Like the Catwoman poster that they used to have at bus stops and whatnot was just like, I guess people needed to have that in their homes. And
I mean, I can appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think that it was like a bigger than me like cutout of Catwoman from that poster. And people were taking that home, and I kind of get it. Like, frankly.
Because as there's 1,000 great things about this movie, even more, but Michelle Pfeiffer as Catwoman is pretty much at the top of the list. But God, you were 2 years old when when this came out.
Yeah, my age always goes with the year because I was born in 1990. So 91, I was 1, 92, I was 2. Pretty easy to keep track of how old I am. But yeah, I have no memory of this movie not existing because my mom was already a massive Tim Burton fan by the time I was born. So like my earliest memories are of watching Tim Burton movies. And more importantly, listening to Danny Elfman music, because my favorite part of this movie, as is my favorite part about any movie that he scores is the Danny Elfman music. And I could go on and on about why Danny Elfman is my Lord and Savior. However, this movie in particular, there's so much nuance in how he approached it because it's Christmas music. A lot of people don't like, well, I should say a lot of people, but now more people are recognizing that this is in fact a Christmas movie.
Yeah.
I made a post earlier today about how HBO even acknowledges that this is a Christmas movie because they put it in like the holiday movies section on HBO Max. And then when you look at the description on HBO, it says like set in Christmas time, Batman has to save Christmas or whatever. And I was like, thank you. It is a freaking Christmas movie. And Danny Elfman's score reflects that too.
If Die Hard is a Christmas movie, there's no way this isn't.
They're both in my top 5 Christmas movies. I cannot get through December without watching Batman Returns or Die Hard. It's necessary, but for very different reasons. Batman Returns is like going home for me. But he Danny very easily could have just taken the score from the first Batman, not counting the Prince stuff, but but his score from the first Batman film, and just kind of reused it and called it a day. But it's Danny Elfman, and he doesn't do that. He doesn't just reuse stuff, even when it's like the most iconic theme. We've had so many versions of Batman now, and we still think of his Batman theme as the definitive Batman music.
Thank you. Yes, this is the thing that I'm always going on about. It's like, because I for one do love the Christopher Nolan Batman films.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But bless Hans Zimmer, he's an amazing composer, and what he makes for those films fits with those films. But it's still like none of his music is ever going to be the Batman theme. It belongs to Danny Elfman, and it always will.
Yeah, and if you watch or play the Arkham Asylum games, like Arkham Asylum, Arkham City, Arkham Origins, the music in those games is very much like calling back to the Danny Elfman. You can tell like they were going for the Danny Elfman score with that one, and there's so many iterations of Batman, like they call back to it because it's just definitive. It's what it is. And Tim Burton did something with Batman that was extremely necessary, because Batman, the character, I'm also kind of a gigantic DC Comics, specifically Batman dork. And in this house, we worship Batman. So when Batman first, the comics were brand new, he was a dark character. And then the 60s happened. And in the 60s, the powers that be, who decided comics are for kids and kids shouldn't be exposed to darkness or death or violence, they decided that Batman needed to be massively revamped. And then we got the Adam West era of Batman, and that was reflected in the comics as well. Very boom, pow, very bright colors, very silly. I don't know what your official MPA rating of your YouTube channel is, if I can say this word.
Yeah,
but there was a lot of use of the word boner in the 60s era of Batman, because there was a lot of like, the Joker pulled a boner, let's all laugh at the everything was very like silly and goofy, and like all of the darkness was taken out. And what Tim Burton did was he decided, like, that's not the Batman that I remember reading as a kid. And he needed to bring back that like boner, that public perception, to remind them that Batman is not a goofy character. He's super dark. The very nature of his character is one that you can't leave out the death and the darkness. That's why every single version of Batman, we've seen the death of his parents 1,000 times, because it's crucial to who he is and his character. So Tim Burton did something with the cultural perspective of Batman, and every version of Batman since, every single one, even the goofiest ones, there's that element that you could tell was post Tim Burton. And that's irreversible in my opinion.
I think the biggest demonstration of that is because even though it had its own style and feel, it was very much inspired by the Tim Burton Batman films, which is Batman the Animated Series,
Mm-hmm.
which for my money, like that takes like a combination of it's actually very loyal to the comics,
Yeah.
which is something you don't necessarily say about Tim Burton's films,
No.
which is part of what I love
No.
about them so much.
Yeah.
But it took, so it did that. The animated series was loyal to the comics, but it also took a lot of stylistic and like
the tone
from those films. And
Yeah.
you look at characters like Catwoman and the Penguin, they,
Yeah.
you know, you can see the similarities
Yeah.
for their how they are in Batman Returns.
Yeah. So here's something I think is super important on that note about how Batman Returns is not necessarily comics accurate. This is something I think is super important that needs to be talked about more right now. And that is that in order to make a movie based on comic book characters, comic accuracy is not always necessarily the formula for perfection, because you can make a movie that is based on a comic book and have it technically portray the events in a way that stays close to the source material, but the movie can still suck.
Yes.
Civil War.
Oh, you're not. You're gonna find some opposition in our chat.
Cough. I'm sorry. Civil War it's a bad movie, especially if you read the comic. It's a really great comic, and the movie does not do it justice. I'm sorry, haters, people who are gonna hate on my haterade, but we can still be friends. Most of my friends are big Marvel suckers as well, and that's fine.
So you all thought I was down on Marvel. See,
I'm gonna try not to go down that road too hard, but I can't contain my distaste for that movie specifically. But it's like the antithesis of what I feel like Batman Returns does, which is like, okay, we have the characters, we have the crux of what makes these characters who they are. But we're still going to take all these creative liberties and take these massive risks with not being necessarily accurate, because we've taken all of these weird choices. And I feel like nowadays there aren't enough movies, especially movies that are comic book adaptations, that take weird risks, like total left field. That's unexpected, like completely break the formula. Make choices that there are going to be people who go, oh, I don't like that. That's strange. I'm the guy who goes, I love it. It's weird. Like, which is, why I love A24 movies and things that are just like, oh, that's strange. Like the Green Knight, for example. Like,
which I was like, I totally understood everybody's schedules are what they are, and you were having to do stuff and
moving,
but I was gutted when I couldn't get you for that, because you had talked about how you loved it. But by the way, if anybody hasn't seen that discussion that I had with Blue Lemon Tree, please go check it out, because we had a blast.
Awesome.
All right, there's my little side note for the Green Knight. I love it. Oh my god. Okay.
Completely agree. But another example of like a weird movie that took a lot of risks, and a lot of people, it was not their cup of tea, but they did it anyway because they made a movie that they wanted to see. So Batman Returns, Tim Burton went in a direction that he openly said was the direction he wanted to go with the first Batman film. And there was a lot of studio interference, a lot of stuff behind the scenes that happened to make it so that what we got on screen for the first Batman film was not ultimately what his perfect vision was. And he got a little more freedom, thanks to the success of that film, to be able to do that with Batman Returns. And he's openly said 1,000 times he's much more proud of Batman Returns. And even Michael Keaton said he was much more, like, he loved filming Batman Returns more. And when he goes back and watches the films, he prefers Batman Returns. And that's extremely validating.
Yeah, well, I think you can feel like when you watch the two movies, Batman very much feels like Tim Burton's take on a Batman movie, and Batman Returns feels like the most wild, batshit crazy Tim Burton movie that happens to feature some Batman characters, and that's what I love so much about it.
Yeah, it's truly a Tim Burton movie first. and a Batman movie second. But that doesn't mean that it's not still a Batman movie, because, segue, the thing that I think Batman Returns does arguably better than most other Batman movies do for me is really lean into that theme, that motif of he feels more like himself as Batman and not as Bruce Wayne. And the idea of who am I really? Which of my faces is actually the mask and which one is my real face? That's literally the whole like core theme of Batman Returns. And the dichotomy of like his relationship with Catwoman, the fact that they're both going through that of like, who actually am I? The costume is actually who I have to pretend to be during the day when I'm interacting with other humans, pretending to be a regular ass citizen of the world. That's the mask. But when we're in the black, that's who we are for real. And they bring that out in each other, and they challenge each other, and they reflect each other. And that's the whole thing. That's so true to Batman. And to me, if you have captured that essence right there, you've already done a perfect Batman adaptation. And it doesn't matter that you took creative liberties with other details in the script, like making the Penguin a mutant from the sewers, which is not from the comics originally. However, a lot of comics afterward did do adaptations of that, because guess what? Comic writers thought, that's actually a pretty cool idea, Tim Burton. Let's do that. So yeah, art influences art, influences art. And look at that.
Yeah, and that's funny, because growing up with these movies, I probably had no notion when I was a kid that this was not a prevalent like vision of the Penguin, because I just accepted it. And that's the thing, like different comics tell different stories.
Yeah.
So I've always found it strange that there's some resistance when a film adaptation veers away from what's established. But if it was done in a comic, it would be like, well, that's a unique take, and let's applaud it. But
in comics, you can get away with that a lot more now, because there's so many like timelines, and like I've had so many friends like, I want to get into comics, where do I start? And you have to be like, well, there's literally 1,000 choices from where you could start, depending on what kind of a story you want. And that's even just for talking about Batman specifically, because there are so many different interpretations just in comics alone, and so many different timelines, and just, it's all over the place. So you can get away with making weird choices in the comics, because it's just another one. And Guilty Undertaker says, Comic Penguin isn't really that interesting. He's just a generic mob boss with a bird motif. Originally, yeah, 100%. And what Tim Burton did here, and not to discredit the screenwriters, of course, Tim Burton didn't write the screenplay, but a lot of it was, his ideas, and a lot of things that he directly approved of, and things he directly wanted to happen. And this version of the Penguin, it didn't completely go against, him being a mob boss. It was really just a unique origin story. And you could see a character like this, had he survived the movie, eventually become a mob boss who owns a bar. It could happen. But they touch on the essence of that, not to keep using a Dark Crystal word, but the essence of who that character is, where his power comes from, how the society of Gotham City responds to him, where he gets his power, even though we look at this guy and we know that's a bad guy. And Batman, the first time he sees him, he looks at him, he's like, I can tell this is a bad guy. Everybody else is, kissing this guy's ass, but like, I'm suspicious. And even Alfred, he calls him out, and he's like, do you have to be the only weirdo with the tragic backstory? Like, why are you so critical of this guy? And he's just like, it's who I am. I got it. I don't trust him.
And then when he finds evidence, Alfred's like, I suppose you feel better now.
He's like, no, actually, I feel worse. And that's because that's the thing that's so tragic about this Bruce Wayne, and what the essence of Bruce Wayne is supposed to be, because he's looking for fellowship. Bruce Wayne sees this character on TV. He sees Danny DeVito's Penguin, and he thinks to himself, this is somebody who I could actually relate to. This is somebody who I could connect with. Is this somebody who could understand me? I question that. And so then when he finds out, damn, my instincts were right, and this he's a bad guy. Two things. One, he gets let down that he doesn't have somebody who understands. And two, it illustrates that crucial Batman thing of Batman is one bad choice away from being a villain. That's why his rogues gallery is so iconic, because all of his best villains are reflections of what he could have become had he gone down a different path. All of his villains are people with similar origin stories that if the things that happened to Bruce Wayne happened to any one of these guys, they become a supervillain, they become the Joker, they become Two-Face, they become the Penguin. He became Batman. And this is yet another example of that.
It's interesting that just as he's like confirmed that no, this is a guy not to be trusted, he's not someone that I can sort of have common ground with or relate to. Well, he can relate to him, but not.
He knows this is another guy I got to fight on a rooftop. Damn it!
But just as he realizes that, like, who all of a sudden pops into his life, it's Selina, and so I think that like is the timing of that is what immediately makes her so intriguing.
Yeah.
To
the
him.
Awesome thing about that connection too is that this film has not one, not two, but three meet cutes with Selina Kyle and Bruce Wayne. So if you are familiar with what a meet cute is in a romantic comedy, when the two romantic leads meet each other and bump into each other, oh, I just needed pajama bottoms and I just needed pajama tops. We're meant for each other. Bye-bye. That sort of thing. So when Selina Kyle and Bruce Wayne meet each other thrice, they get three separate scenes that illustrate what their relationship is. So you have Batman meeting Selina Kyle pre-Catwoman. And it's like this awkward, like they can't relate to each other.
By the way, can I just say like how like I'm always in love with the way that they light Batman and he's like in the shadow, and it's just so great.
It's sort of like in a negative space, like the highlights are reflecting his silhouette and the shadows are in the center, which is like completely backwards to what we are traditionally taught to do when we illustrate something. But it 100% works because it's sort of symbolizing like he is the knight. His face is being concealed because his face is what's in question. That's his internal conflict, is what my true face is. So, it's beautiful. This movie has so many levels and people need to get on board with that. There's so much going on. So yeah, the first time that technically Batman meets Selina, it's before she has her Catwoman moment, and it's very awkward. And she has the taser with the bad guy, and
I love that.
and she like introduces herself like, "Wow, the Batman," or is it just Batman?
Which I feel is kind of a meta thing.
Yeah, totally, because all of us have done that. And then he just kind of blows her off and walks away like, yeah, okay, whatever. And then she's like, your choice, of course. Like, oh, okay. She does the awkward girl thing.
Which
in movies.
It's real easy to praise Michelle Pfeiffer for like once she turns into Catwoman, all that. But I do love her, awkwardness and these opening scenes, even in The Office, where after, they all walk out and they've been like absolutely horrid to her, and she's like, actually it was more like a question,
and she calls herself a corn dog. And that was literally this, well, not literally, figuratively, the seed that planted why I'm obsessed with calling dumbasses food names. Like I will often call myself a corn dog, or like, oh, that guy's a total corn dog.
And then
like,
she berates herself for saying that. She's like, corn dog.
Exactly. And I'm like, no, that you're brilliant. You're a trendsetter. She's groundbreaking. But one of my least favorite movie tropes that happens, particularly in romantic comedies, but also it can happen in comic book movies too, cough, Wonder Woman 1984, cough, is when a girl just like, she has her glasses on and she's clearly like hot as hell, but she has glasses. And so she like is kind of clumsy, and everyone's like, oh, she's ugly, she's never going to make anything of herself, look at her, she has glasses. And then like the big transformation, she takes off her glasses, she's like, I'm hot and powerful now. Like, I hate that personally when it's done wrong. However, this movie kind of it set the standard for how to do that the right way, and other movies tried to do it and sort of did it the wrong way. But the fact that Michelle Pfeiffer still, she created a completely separate character that was more than just clumsy with glasses. Her pre-Catwoman wasn't just, oh, I trip and I wear glasses. It was, she's been kicked around her whole life by the men she dates, by her workplace, by her mother. That little scene where she's checking her messages, you get her entire life story from that little 1 minute scene where she's checking her voicemail, and her mom is just, you can tell her mom is an awful human being, and you're like, oh, okay. And the dude she's dating, who's like, that vacation we planned, I'm going to go by myself. My therapist says that I need to be my own person and not an appendage, which means, okay, she's only dating men who are not secure. She's only dating men who are not good for her. And there's just so much context that we get from that little moment. And then, of course, she has the telemarketer from the company that she works for, which means she's so overlooked that even the company has her on the list of like, we got to try to sell our stuff to this person, even though she works here.
And oh my God, when she comes back to the apartment and
mirrors that whole scene,
and it's a voicemail again from the company, and it talks about like a candlelight dinner with the boss. Like, first of all, like what? And but the fact that is obviously the thing that just really sets her off. And Danny Elfman, the way Danny Elfman's music builds, and
okay,
like the music in that
scene. Okay, here's what's great about this score. I'm gonna start a thing and then tangent and then come back to it a million times. So bear with me. That's who I am as a person. So naturally, the Hell Here shot, amazing. I could go on and on about this sequence forever, but Danny Elfman created these really unique, I love that shot. There's actually there's a figure you can buy out there. I want to say it's from McFarlane Toys. I could be wrong. There's a million other people it could be. It could have been NECA. Made a figure of this moment. It's like a Catwoman figure, and it has the window with the Hell Here in it. I don't remember if it was a limited run or something, but it exists. Do a Google, you'll find it somewhere. I want it.
I wish I was like closer to the wall so I could take this off. I went to a convention in around here in Florida in 2019. It was the very last convention I went to, because I went to the Game of Thrones convention, and I was like, no, I still have the bug. I need to go to one more. But there was this artist who was selling artwork, and he had this beautiful painting of Catwoman with the hell here,
the neon pink
and everything. So like I bought it, like it's up on my wall. So I will have to, like, after this is over, I'll snap a picture and put it up on Twitter or something. But
amazing.
But like as soon as I saw it, I was like, I have to have that. It's so iconic and just perfect.
The neon pink up against all the black, and that moment how she takes the black spray paint and she just like goes over all of the pastel pink of her former self. I'm like, I did that same thing when I was about 12. I was like, this isn't who I am anymore. But so what Danny Elfman did with the Catwoman music in particular was that he made the violin motif the theme for her, because the sound of the violin is like a cat. And so like every time she's on screen, you get that little violin thing, but then it builds to that amazing forever. I will go on about this music, but the
right now everyone in the chat is typing up oh my God, John, you've found a kindred spirit. Don't let her escape.
Okay, well, here's the thing. Before I got into talking about movies on the internet, I'm a trained musician and a vocal coach, and so music is, I can't detach from the music. So it's very much part of my like family identity. In fact, yesterday I was over at my brother's house recording our family Christmas album, because every year we record a Christmas album because that's how we do. So you literally cannot give me a movie and have me not say something about the music. And frankly, I'm sorry to piss off your fans if this pisses off your people. But one of the things that I dislike so much about a lot of the MCU is that the music is all just stock music. I don't remember even the main Marvel theme that happens as it's showing the comic. I can like never remember how that goes. Like
I want to give like credit where credit is due. I actually do think that Alan Silvestri wrote a memorable Avengers theme, but that's
the one, right? Though
that's the one that sticks in my head. The rest of it,
that's the closest one.
And I don't say this to piss off my friends, but because I honestly wish that there was more memorable music in those films, because for me it would help it, because like so much of what I love about a movie is the film music.
Yeah. Well, I like a singable theme. It's a theme that gets stuck in your head. Like that's what makes the Batman music so like you only have to hear it once. You only have to hear it one time, and then you're like, ba-da-da-da-da, that's Batman music. Yeah. And you can't really do that with a lot of the Marvel films. However, I will say credit where credit is due. Shang-Chi and the however many rings. I really actually enjoyed that one when I saw it, because the first thing I thought was, oh, I noticed this music. This is it. I actually like noticed it. So nice. The Shang-Chi music, excellent. I will say that was when I saw that film, I was like, this is a breath of fresh air. Almost everything about this movie directly corrects all the things that I dislike about MCU movies. So I do recommend that one, but particularly for the music.
Yeah, that's the film. That's one of the films that I haven't seen yet, because I did recently get done telling everybody, like, okay, like unless I'm really interested in like, you know, a specific like character, a Marvel character, something.
It's a real good one.
I'm not going to rush out to go see everything, because that just turns me against Marvel more.
Yeah. So, and I try not to be like, let me make it clear to the universe, I'm not anti-Marvel. There are just a lot of things about most of the MCU movies that make me crazy, and what they actually, the trend that they set off for kind of how we do movies now, particularly how we do comic book movies. I'm ready for something else now.
Well, and I think that's exactly why movies like Batman Returns are just so great to me, because it's like I just, you know, and I do want to say, because it's very easy for me to shall we say annoy my friends when I start talking about Marvel, and this is not a stream about Marvel, so we shouldn't, I don't want to delve into it too much, so I'm just basically, the thing is, for me personally, I love it when movies go off in batshit crazy directions, and
Batman shit.
And the Marvel movies by design aren't doing that, because that's sort of their whole thing. They have
a formula. It makes them money. People keep going to see it and freaking out. So it's not their fault. It's working.
And if the audience loves it, then more power to them. It's you know, that's fine. For my own personal taste, though, like this is the stuff that I thrive off of, because
we're
it's
weird
so
kids,
insane.
man. We like puppets.
Yeah,
we're weird, creative kids who want more puppets in our movies and less movie in our movie, and better music that we can go home singing to ourselves the rest of the day. But yeah, I only bring up Marvel because I feel like Batman Returns directly addresses those things that just drive me nuts about Marvel movies. It's like the antithesis of those things that I wish we would get away from. It's my example of like, see, it went wild. And the thing is, Batman Returns remained the #1 movie in the box office for the remaining time that it was in the theaters until Jurassic Park came out the following year. So it worked. People went to see it. People were into it. And they still are, because when you think Catwoman, you can't not think about,
But
like, it might not be your favorite version of Catwoman is the Michelle Pfeiffer version, but you still know it and you still give it credit.
that is, I do want to talk about the phenomenon of when this movie came out, because I
Mhm.
am delighted by how freaked out parents got from this movie.
Dude, my grandma still, when I watch this movie every Christmas, my grandma's like, I don't like this one. It's too dark. And I'm like,
But
it's
just the fact that
Batman.
like it had like toys and, you know, and like the fact that they had to make like Happy Meals out of
Yeah.
this movie and stuff. I'm just like, there's no way to appreciate that when you're a
Yeah.
kid. Even if I was like, I think I was 8 years old when the movie came out.
Mhm.
So like, and what's funny is I remember like, I think the concern amongst like studio executives were that like kids weren't going to respond to this one. But I
My
remember
kids did.
I was 8 years old and I was like, this is awesome. I love this.
100%. Yeah.
And that just the fact that that's, I don't know if it, concerned my parents, but I know that parents at large were very put off by this, and so
Yeah.
much so that there was the reaction of, after this we have to lighten things up dramatically.
Yeah.
But I'm just as someone who responds to weird shit, I'm delighted that it pushed things so far. I mean,
Yeah.
you watch this movie where Penguin constantly has blood gushing like down his
Yeah.
nose and mouth.
Yeah.
Catwoman is, let's just say it, in a dominatrix outfit for
Yeah. They
the
literally
film.
had to vacuum seal her. They literally put a vacuum up against a part of her costume and sucked air, vacuum sealed her in her costume to the point that she could only do a scene for X amount of time before they had to let her air out so that she could then breathe again. She also couldn't hear in the costume because it was so tightly vacuum sealed up against her head that it was essentially deafening her because she had latex earmuffs on her head. And Tim Burton often had to direct her to like speak quieter than she thinks she needs to because she was yelling a lot of her lines because she couldn't hear.
Yeah.
And bless her for doing that. And then she said, due to those reasons after that she would probably never reprise the role because it was just too challenging. And even though she loves that she did it, and she loves that it's gone down in history as an iconic role for her, she said how, I don't think I could ever do it again. I'm glad that they didn't continue that story because I don't think I would have been able to do it.
Which makes me happy for her, but
yeah,
at the same time, I can't help but feel sad because
yeah,
we were talking about this before we went on, but you get to the end of this movie and, she pops up in the frame and
a puppet, by the way, that's a puppet. Did you know that was a puppet?
I thought they had gotten, from what I heard, I thought they had gotten somebody else to come in and stand in and
they
and
did. And then for whatever reason, they didn't end up using it. And they had they made an animatronic Catwoman. That's why you only see it from behind.
Okay.
It comes up and so it's wild. The fact that there's a puppet Catwoman head that comes up.
But like that happens and you're geared up and ready for the next Tim Burton Batman film where Catwoman is obviously going to return based off of that scene, and then it didn't happen, and like I think that's part of like, granted, the franchise didn't go in great directions after that, but I think
it went in a few directions. That's the thing.
I wouldn't have been, I'd have been hard pressed to be happy with any follow-up to that wasn't Tim Burton. So
yeah. Well, here's the thing. Now, almost 3 full decades after this movie comes out, because it's about to have been 30 years technically in a year it will have been 30 years because I think it came out in like November or December, but technically 2022 makes the 30th year that it's been out. So did she not do most of her own stunts in that? So she did she did do most of them. She learned how to do, she said she did, I think, Tai Chi. She did a bunch of martial arts. She did a bunch of yoga. She learned all the whip stuff. That's all her. She still has her whip. So yeah, she's excellent.
Yeah,
Still the best
agreed.
Catwoman movie. Well, we don't
Agreed,
have a
yes.
lot of Catwoman movies, to be fair. I'm hopeful about the Matt Reeves one because it looks like it's gonna get weird, and it looks like they're taking Catwoman in a dark direction again, and that's
Yeah,
I
my
have high
only,
hopes.
and it's funny, we're going to keep going off in different directions if we're not
Yeah,
careful. But I will say I've been slightly apprehensive about the Matt Reeves movie because it does appear to be going for a sort of gritty, realistic approach, which I feel like the Christopher Nolan movies kind of covered that area. So
yeah,
I'm interested to see what it brings to
yeah.
the franchise that's new.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, he's claiming he's going in like a neo-noir direction, almost like borderline horror movie, and that he's going to be
okay.
focusing primarily on Bruce Wayne becoming the world's greatest detective, and we're going to see him do a lot of detective work. And I feel like that could be potentially really interesting. But to go on that segue back to Batman Returns, I do think that Batman Returns showcases Bruce Wayne as a detective in a way that is better than what we see in the first Batman film. We see him kind of deep dive and like research, and as that moment we were talking about earlier where he first sees the Penguin and is suspicious of him, he immediately takes to the Bat computer and starts looking up, like putting the pieces together to figure out this guy's entire backstory. There he is, Detective Boy in his
Yeah,
glasses. Those are actually kind of similar to mine.
which is and by the way, I also want to raise the point that you look back at before the first film came out and how skeptical people were about Michael
Mm-hmm.
Keaton being Batman, and then I'm
Yeah.
like, don't say that.
Yeah.
Michael Keaton is Batman.
But
So,
he was romantic comedy guy before
yeah.
that. So it was hard for people to visualize it. But I mean, time and again, sometimes you have to trust the director's choices because he knows what he's doing, Tim Burton.
Yeah.
He or at least, I know that's arguable now. A lot of people have spicy opinions about Tim Burton movies in the last decade, but most people agree that early 90s Tim Burton, he knew what he was doing. And
Well, all artists kind of have their
yeah,
periods that you view as like when they were on fire, and
yeah. Yeah,
you
and
know,
so many people doubted Heath Ledger as well. A lot of people,
yeah.
before we saw the first images of him as the Joker and they just announced that it was going to be him, so many people, don't try to pretend like you didn't go, Heath Ledger, he's that 10 Things I Hate About You guy. Like, he can do serious. Can he be scary? He's too pretty. He's too this, he's too that, because we didn't have it in our heads. Like, what was he possibly going to do? There's no way we could have fathomed what Heath Ledger was going to do with that interpretation of the Joker.
Because you hear Heath Ledger is going to play the Joker, I'm thinking William Thatcher from A Knight's Tale.
Also that, but
yeah,
not a role you would associate with somebody who's also playing the Joker. You could have maybe thought like Alan Tudyk would have been a good Joker, and frankly,
I don't know the answer to this.
the first time an internet search was shown in a movie, I don't know.
I couldn't.
Do an internet search.
Yeah, I'll have to look that up
Maybe.
because I feel like I don't know. There had to be something before, maybe. I don't
Yeah.
know.
I know this was in like the early days of the internet in the early 90s. So unless they were showing people do internet searches in like late 80s movies, they might have, for all I know. And then watch, somebody's going to pull up some examples of it happening, and I'm going to feel like a big dumbass. I'm like, oh yeah, I know about that, but it's falling out of my head right now because all I can think about is Batman.
I think everybody's forgetting the internet searches that were run in the Dark Crystal.
Yeah, that's fair. Totally. So yeah, Michael Keaton, a lot of people did not. I mean, the rumor is that the Warner Brothers Studios were just flooded with hate mail of people protesting, like, don't cast Michael Keaton. He's not Batman. That's a horrible idea. But man, look at what he did. He's so good. And part of what makes him so great is how he showcases that idea that he is Batman first and Bruce Wayne second. Bruce Wayne is the costume. And I have to say, it's both hilarious, but also awesome that the first scene that we see Michael Keaton in this movie, when they light up the bat signal, he's literally just sitting in his office, like doing nothing, just sitting there pondering to himself, like, boy, I wish they'd turn my signal on so I could get back to my real life.
Which it was, well, and that's all part of, like, this is such a beautifully dark gothic fairy tale, so stuff like that totally works. Another funny thing about that scene is, like, wait a second, he's got like things all around his big mansion that have like bat signals on them that point, it like, doesn't somebody notice?
Well,
but it doesn't matter because it's all just part of the sort of,
there's
again,
a lot of suspension of disbelief.
Yeah.
And you could get away with doing stuff like that in this era of movies still. You can make
Yeah.
bizarre choices like that and overlook certain things because it was more about the tone that it set and getting the essence of the characters and creating memorable moments. It wasn't so much about the logic of the movie, but it was about the way you came away feeling after you saw the movie. And you remember specific moments in it, and you remember the place that you went in your soul when you watched the movie. Keaton is my forever Batman. Yeah. Speaking of Batman Forever, as much as I will trash talk it occasionally, I do love watching Batman Forever, and I do still have my McDonald's Batman Forever mugs. This is the one with the Joker.
God, I love it.
Yeah.
I know I had those, and I feel like they're still boxed up somewhere.
You can,
in
every
my
so often, that you find them at thrift stores. If you hit up like Goodwill and like consignment stores and stuff. And I always walk up and down the glass sections to look for them because that's how I found ones that, like, that's how I found this one, because I had them all as a kid. And then, you know, life happened and God knows what happened to them. And then I refound these, and I've been slowly building back up my collection of these because they're so cool. They're so nice. This is like old as hell, and it's so good still.
I know I have very similar ones for the Fellowship of the Ring, which are actually in the drawer right next to me. But I'm going to save those for tomorrow on Here Be Dragons.
The ones that are like goblets?
Yeah, I'm plugged in a little early, but on Here Be Dragons tomorrow, I'll be talking with Stephen, Kelly, and Dan about the Fellowship of the Ring. It'll be its 20th anniversary. Yeah. Dear God, I can't believe it.
How awesome is that?
So I'll show those off on that stream.
Yeah, I have the Arwen one.
Yeah, it's which it's so funny to talk about sidetracking, but it's so funny to think back to those days of like before the movie came out, and like it was because it was big to book fans but not to like everybody else yet, and to remember the days of like picking up, you know, the promotional stuff from different fast food restaurants and stuff. And it's like, this is about to explode, guys. You have no idea. But yeah.
And it's funny to see what items now like are the ones that are of value, and then like value, and which ones are at the consignment stores. But of course, those are the ones that are valuable to me. I'm like, oh, Riddler cup. But speaking of random little factoids about the movie, though, pertaining to merchandise, here's another one. So you may or may not know that originally in like the original script for Batman Returns, they were going to introduce Robin in this one. It was going to be Tim Drake Robin, though, as opposed to Dick Grayson Robin. But a lot of the events of Batman Forever are things that were left over that didn't end up getting used in the original script for Batman Returns. The original script had Robin and Two-Face in it. They were going to bring back Billy D. Williams, aka Lando Calrissian, to play Harvey Dent, because he plays Harvey Dent in the first Batman film, and he was set to come back as Harvey Dent and do the Two-Face story for Batman Returns, and they ended up going a different direction and then using the Two-Face story for Batman Forever. But they were also supposed to introduce Robin originally in Batman Returns, and they had concept designs. He wasn't cast yet, but they had concept designs and costume designs. And Kenner Toys they had already made a deal with Kenner Toys to start producing action figures based on the movie.
Wasn't he gonna be played by Marlon Wayans? If I'm not mistaken, wasn't
that was for Batman Returns? I remember hearing that, but I couldn't remember if that was for Batman Returns or if that was for Batman Forever when they started casting for that. But yeah, that was going to happen. But before they had him cast yet, all they had were costume designs. They already made the deal with Kenner Toys, and there still are to this day. You can track them down at toy stores and find them. The Robin action figure that says Batman Returns on it, like, it exists. They made those action figures of like this Robin that's from nothing, but it has the Batman Returns logo on it. You'd be like, wait, why does this say Robin's not in Batman Returns? What in the actual heck? But
bye, Cassie.
Yeah. Bye. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's hilarious to me.
Yeah, it's always funny when like because the marketing people always have to be working on this stuff well in advance. So for any like decisions that are made later in the process, because yet another sidetrack, but I remember when the first Hobbit film was going to come out in 2012, like well into like the middle of the year, they were promoting stuff for the original cut of that film, which was when it was just 2 films. And so they had stuff for like the character of Tariel and all that stuff. And then the movie comes out and, she's nowhere to be seen. And so it's just like, oh yeah, that stuff slips through the cracks.
Yeah. It's those toy deals, man. They have to go through like boom, 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 because they learned pretty much through Star Wars that toys get butts in the seats pretty fast, and that the toys are where a lot of your money comes from. A lot of the times, the toy sales are what pay for your movie. So, like it literally did for Star Wars, and so they get right on that, man. And Kenner, that's literally the Star Wars toys company. So they're always swooping in there like, oh, we hear you're making a movie. You don't have it cast yet? Don't worry about it. Just give us a couple character names and we'll pump out a couple action figures. Everyone's going to go see your movie. Like that's Kenner for you. And I really want that Robin.
Which it's like, is it any wonder so often that toys don't look anything like the characters from the film?
I mean, that would be a big part of why. Is it any boy wonder? Oh, God, kill me. So where were we in terms of Batman Returns at this point? Because now,
we have gone all over the place. So if you can come up with something you want to say for about 2 or 3 minutes, then we'll do the mid-roll.
Okay, because I wanted to get into also how the second meet cute of Batman and Catwoman is when they meet with their masks on as Bruce Wayne and as Selina Kyle. And this time it's interesting because they're both in their persona, like their daytime job look. So they're in the same phase of what's happening, but it's also post Catwoman. So now she's going through that duality internally, much like Bruce Wayne is. And they meet at the office, and it's this very like awkward romantic comedy, like
sorry, I mistook me for somebody else.
Yeah. But think about that line. He mistook himself he forgot that he was Batman when he met her. He did I mistook me for someone else. Like, that's genius.
And like, while we're talking about that line, like I just want to say, like, Michael Keaton as Bruce Wayne in this film is hilarious.
Yeah, he doesn't know how to be a human. He's total doofus. He's a corn dog.
Yeah,
much like Selina.
He's just some of my favorite parts of this movie. Are like, he has a bit with Alfred where he's like, security, who let Vicky Vale into the Batcave? I'm sitting there. Oh, hi, Vic. And then there's another part where he's in the Batmobile, driving away from the cops, and he's trying to like detach the sides of the Batmobile, and it's not working. And he's like, he just says, "That's funny." And then
This is fine.
then the second later, he's like, okay, now I'm getting a little worried.
Yeah. Yeah. He brings that. What makes an interesting hero, and we know now because, not to say the M word again, but they really play up on this motif or this trope of making the hero kind of a doofus the rest of the time because it's funny. Like, to an extent, you kind of have to do that, because if a character is literally nothing but awesome 24/7, that's boring. He can't be, Mr. Perfect. That's not reality. You can't relate to him at that point. The hero has to be a human underneath that. We have to be able to connect to them as a flawed human being somehow. And Batman is such a prime example of, you have to get that balance just right, because he has to be kind of when you meet him as Bruce Wayne, you're supposed to think to yourself, this guy could never be Batman. That's his cover. That's why it's a mask. It's the costume, because people are supposed to think this guy is a total dumbass. He's just a dumb rich boy who he's such a goofball. How could he possibly be Batman? It doesn't even cross people's minds that he might be Batman. Like, that's his Clark Kent glasses.
Well, yeah, and like even at the end, Shrek says, "And Bruce Wayne, why are you dressed up like Batman?"
Yeah, yeah,
because he is Batman, you moron.
Even then, like, it's literally right in front of people's faces, and they don't see it. But yeah, again, that theme of what the movie is talking about with society, and when you spoon feed things to people, and just the right media perspective can make something that is clearly objectively bad look sellable, and you can make it the mayor. And you can take this guy that's like, he is clearly a bad guy, but
it's funny because now that I think about it, there are actually some great sort of parallels between like I we were going to get to this point eventually, that you can draw between like Dark Crystal, particularly Age of Resistance, and the Oswald Cobblepot, story of this, of presenting you with like, just okay, look at these guys. They're evil.
Yeah.
It doesn't take a genius to figure this out, but
you plant enough seeds in the ground, they grow into truth. Like, it's a really interesting commentary, and the world is like that.
I mean, when, like, especially when Age of Resistance was airing, like, I don't want to specifically talk about modern day political stuff, but
the T word.
Yeah, but you can't escape it, and you watch both Penguin and Shrek. You have your pick as to which representation you want to go with,
and you give somebody enough money and power and enough influence and just the right media coverage, you can make a monster a mayor. So and on that bright note, we're going to pause and go ahead and do the mid-roll. For anybody who's tuning in for the first time, don't go anywhere. We're not finished, just taking a break. I want to, first of all, repeat that tomorrow on Here Be Dragons, I'll be talking with Steven and our guests, Kelly, the Jaded Redhead, and, Jaded Redhead, as I'm contractually obligated to call her. And also Dan, Voice of Geekdom. We're going to be talking about the 20th anniversary of the Fellowship of the Ring. Very excited for that. So cool.
Who knew? Me talking Lord of the Rings, and I'm excited. And also, I want to announce that I will not. See, she's happy. Clearly. And next Saturday, I won't be live streaming because guess what? It's Christmas. And I'm sure you guys all have. I think you guys are all going to have other things to do, but I did want to stream next week. So we're actually going to do a special live stream right here on Wednesday. That is the 22nd. I'm going to be talking about the Christmas movie that I watch every year and I love Actually. And I have a treat for you guys. Who's going to be joining me? my co-host will be returning next week for this discussion. Amy
Cool.
Blackfire will be taking part with me, and I am absolutely delighted to have her back, even if
That's
it's
so cool.
just for a week. So please join us on Wednesday, 22nd at 7:00 p.m. Eastern, and we will talk about some Love Actually, and I promise to talk about some parts of the movie that aren't just Keira Knightley.
Because there's a lot.
Yeah.
Most of them involve Mr. Bean.
Yeah. And yeah, I'm just so excited because Amy and I have been talking for a while about doing this, but she's had some stuff going on and she's been job hunting and doing lots of stuff. So, but we just figured it out that we were going to be able to make it work. So I'm so excited, and here is Amy herself, and Amy, I'm so excited. Yay.
I love the way you spell your name, by the way. Yay for weirdly spelled names.
And which, by the way, I've already told her this in private, but like, as far as I'm concerned, Amy, you know, yeah, you haven't been on the channel in a while, but you are still my co-host. You are still a part of this channel. So anytime you're able to, you are going to be welcome on, because it wouldn't be Cinematic Realms without you. You know that. So yeah, looking forward to next week. Going to be a lot of fun. And yes, Kate, that will be at 7 p.m. as usual. So just a different day, but same time.
Very cool.
All right. And as for after that, I'll probably be taking a little break because January is going to be all over the place, because as many of you know, I will be at a thing called HereBeCon in Texas, where we're all going to be together and hanging out. So yeah, so things will be a little busy. So I might take a little break for that.
You should
Anyway.
vlog the con. You should vlog the con and post some stuff.
Oh, well, we are going to be doing Here Be Dragons streams. So, but since we'll already be doing that, I myself am going to take a break.
Oh, okay.
But
that's fair. I guess you need to live your life a little bit.
Yeah. But anyway, so Sydney, what is going on with you guys over on Trial by Stone, or anything else you've got going on?
Well, we just released an episode that is an audio commentary of episode 2 of Age of Resistance, which, if you are a fan of the Dark Crystal and you are upset that there is no season 2 of Age of Resistance, well, at least you can rewatch the series with audio commentary and listen to other people like myself dorking out about it. We also have a couple of audio commentaries up from other episodes, one of which including one of the writers, Javier Grillo-Marxuach, who is a very famous and prolific screenwriter. He came on with us and did an audio commentary on the episode that he wrote. We are right now celebrating the 39th anniversary of the original Dark Crystal film. And we are about to enter the year of the 40th anniversary. So we're going to be doing a lot of special anniversary posts in the coming months. So keep an eye on all our social media. Trial by Stone, darkcrystalpodcast.com is basically where it'll have the link to all of our other stuff. I recently attended San Diego Comic-Con Special Edition, and I vlogged it. And that's going to be up on our YouTube channel pretty soon here. Nice. And this is a couple of months in advance, but this is my first official announcement of it online, actually. I am starting my very own YouTube channel where I will be deep diving on doing some very similar things that John does, but I'm specifically going to be talking about 80s fantasy films and fantasy lore and fantasy literature, but I also will discuss some other stuff as well that I won't spoil too much right now, but I am working on my own YouTube project that will be launching either end of January or in February. So keep an eye out for that. I'm sure that John will do me a solid and post about it like crazy when that happens.
I absolutely will. Yes, keep us apprised of that, because you've got some people on here will be very anxious to hit subscribe, myself included.
That was very motivating. I've been wanting to do it for a while and have been I've started like getting things ready to do it. And then I moved across California and I had to put the creative part of it on hold. I've just been sort of, collecting all the things I need to do it. I'm getting my recording station set up. It is not this, so it's not going to have my kitchen behind me every single time. We literally just moved 1 week ago exactly. We moved here. But yeah, starting in January, I can start actually filming and getting content out there. And when I came onto your channel before to talk about Dark Crystal, it was like, seeing a new audience and responding and talking about other movies here with you and stuff. It was like, yeah, I'm ready to start doing it. You really do need to rewatch The Dark Crystal one of these days. You really do, because you appreciate it in entire new ways as an adult compared to when you're a traumatized kid weirded out by the puppets you weren't expecting to be as gross as scary as they were. But yeah, so that's pretty much that about that. If I'm forgetting anything else and Phil is watching this going, why didn't you mention that? I'm terribly sorry, but it'll all be announced on the Trial by Stone website, darkcrystalpodcast.com. We'll have all of our updates. We do blog posts and stuff on there too. So, but as for me personally, you can find me at Blackstar Far Dreamer on Instagram, and keep an eye out for me on YouTube in the coming months after the holiday season.
And you gave us a little tease about maybe one day on Twitter, so we're gonna look out for that too.
If I get enough people paying attention to me on my YouTube channel and they want to see me in other places, and it would behoove me to be on Twitter, I could see it happening. I could be less overwhelmed by it if I know there will be cool people there waiting for me and it's not all terrifying people. So if I can handle Facebook, I think I can handle Twitter.
Yeah, my trick is lots of muted words that I don't want to hear about.
Interesting.
Yeah. So once again, just to reiterate, you guys, if you're like, okay, I get it. You may not all be as fanatic about the Dark Crystal as I am, but still, I say, do me a solid and subscribe to their podcast, Trial by Stone. Because
if you like podcasts, we're fun to listen to on your commutes.
Yeah,
and I'll get you hyped about puppets one way or another.
Yeah. But yeah, so I think that about covers it. So let's veer back over to Batman Returns, which we started to talk about Penguin a bit. Let's talk about this gloriously grotesque.
Not at all comics accurate, but amazing. And
like the movie starts off like garnering he is very despicable throughout the film, clearly, but the movie starts off on a very sympathetic note for him. The poor guy gets tossed out as an infant by his parents, while they're they stroll him outside in the snow, and they're saying Merry Christmas to people going past them, and it's just they just heave him over.
By the way, Pee-wee Herman, Paul Reubens is the Penguin's dad, and Simone from Pee-wee's Big Adventure is Mrs. Cobblepot. Look at them. I'm sorry. I think Paul Reubens is sexy as hell, and you cannot tell me otherwise. Look at him. I love it when Paul Reubens plays other characters besides Pee-wee. And I love Pee-wee. But I think that Paul Reubens is a very underrated comedic actor. He can play so many other kinds of roles as well. And Tim Burton 100% understands that. I love him in this 5-second role. It's so good. And to see him and Simone back together from Pee-wee's Big Adventure, she is amazing in this role as well. I love this opening sequence. It's amazing. It sets the tone so beautifully. It tells you what kind of a movie you're in for.
And the brilliant thing about Tim Burton has always been that he takes the most horrifying things that should be repulsive to your senses, and he makes you laugh at it endlessly.
Well, he's all about the OG monster movies, just like Guillermo del Toro is. He's all about the sympathetic monster and making the ugly lovable. That's kind of his whole brand, which I live for.
Yeah, I did know this, that even though I haven't watched all of
True,
Gotham,
true,
yeah,
true. And you best believe I squealed like a fangirl when that happened. I was like, ah! I will not replicate the squeal for you right now for the sake of all your ears, but oh my goodness, I loved him on Gotham. And Gotham was really hot and cold for me. There were things about it I loved, things about it I did not love. One of the things in the love column was absolutely when Paul Rubens came on as Oswald's father, because it was different than what he did in Batman Returns. He didn't just do the same character again, but they cast him specifically because of that, because it was
oh yeah,
very much a callback to it. And I was just so over the moon. Like, I loved it so much. So good. Love Paul Rubens. I will stand him for the rest of my days.
yeah. But I do want to say the thing about Penguin is that, because again, I saw this for the first time when I was, I guess, 8 years old, and we could say that a lot of things went over my head.
Yeah,
Shall
totally.
we say? There's a
That's
lot
fair.
of, if you even want to call it innuendo, it's when it comes out of the Penguin's mouth, it's not even innuendo. He's just
the pussy I want to
yeah,
see.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah. And so, but when I was a kid, you know, I was very innocent about a lot of stuff. So,
that's
but
fair.
as I've gotten older, I've been like, oh my God, they were really pushing it.
Did not
And
hold back.
yeah, and so he just becomes more and more just uh, foul and grotesque.
Yeah.
I guess are
Well,
the
he
only words
has
that
like
spring to
no
mind.
social boundaries whatsoever. Like,
Yeah,
he does not care. He has no F's to give. He's not quite as trained in the art of putting on a face for the crowd. He tries. He does the whole, like, I'm sympathetic, trying to find my parents. When, yeah, there it is. Like, I have a name. I'm a man. And we, the audience, know, because we're watching Bruce Wayne figure it out, that this man already knew who his parents were. And he is the guy who put his parents in the ground. He found them already and murdered them, and that's why they're dead. And he's putting this whole entire act on now to get sympathy and to, be able to manipulate the people whose eyes are on him so that he can ultimately kill a bunch of babies.
which and like that's the thing. Like when I was little, I got by the end of the movie that, like, because he comes out and he says, I'm going to kill all your firstborn. Like, so even as a kid, I get that that's what they're doing. But what I came to really appreciate as I got older was like all the earlier scenes where he's going in and he's writing down lists of names and stuff. Because if you're paying attention, you can follow along sort of
Yeah.
with what he's doing.
Yeah.
And a lot of that stuff did not even occur to me
Mm-mm.
as I was a kid. So I wasn't sure what
Yeah.
like his intentions were
Yeah.
or anything.
Because they
So
frame it at that point to make it look like he's trying to find the information about his parents. And he's
yeah,
going through lists of babies who were born to try to figure out who he is. But then you find out with Batman that, he already knows who he is. That's why when Bruce Wayne says, I think he knows who his parents are in that scene, that's him realizing he's not doing what he says he's doing. He already knows. What is he doing right now? Why does he actually want to go into City Hall and get all those names? Something's up.
which,
Yeah.
oh my God, that line by Shrek, have a heart, give the Constitution a rest.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, other fun fact. Do you know who was supposed to play Max Shrek before they got Christopher Walken?
I don't.
David Bowie.
Oh my God. Like that would have been great too.
Yeah.
But
he
I
turned it
gotta,
down so he could do Twin Peaks.
okay.
Fire Walk with Me.
But like still, I wouldn't want anybody other than
Yeah.
Christopher Walken because
Yeah. Other fun fact, Tim Burton was terrified of Christopher Walken.
I did hear that.
He didn't want Christopher Walken at first because he was like really intimidated by him and scared of him. But then obviously they ended up working together fairly well, and then he cast him again later for Sleepy Hollow. I love how the Penguin uses a feather quill, which even with this movie was made at least 100 years out of date. Yeah. I agree with that.
But that's the beautiful thing
bird motif
about this film, even more so than the first one, because the first one actually had more sort of some realistic sort of, it felt more like a lived in world.
It felt like the 80s.
Yeah, this is, very much the sort of, it's like a fantasy. It's got
it is
Art
a
Deco
fantasy
design
you
and
could
everything.
plug it in any era. It doesn't automatically tell you necessarily based on the context of the movie, this is set in 1992. Whereas if you watch the first Batman, you're like, this is set in 1989. But, and Prince certainly does not help that. But not that I have a problem with Prince whatsoever.
Yeah, but as someone who is so in love with film score, like, I personally respond much more to the music of this film than the Prince stuff. Always, as good as it is, it works beautifully, but it does kind of pull me out a bit, because
it adds levity. It lightens it up, and it dates it. It turns it into an 80s movie instead of a Batman movie. And the movie is more batshit. Yeah, Batman shit. It's Batman shit crazy. So yeah, I agree. And the Prince music is great, like standalone too. And because now it's 30 years later, we look fondly on it with nostalgia. Whereas at the time, I think I still would have preferred, even though I was 2 years old, I still, let's pretend for a minute I wasn't 2 years old and I was an adult, and I would have probably still enjoyed the more fantasy take on it, the more timeless take on it, where you could kind of plug it at any decade and it has this sort of otherworldly, people aren't using cell phones yet. They weren't in real life, but also if we look at movies now that are meant to be otherworldly, they deliberately don't put things like cell phones in them because it doesn't date it. It doesn't say like this movie is from 2021. And so many things that happen there is funky music playing at Shrek's party, and great segue there. That funky music playing at Shrek's party. First we have Super Freak playing in the background. But honestly, like, Super Freak still plays in the background of
and also I think that, like, that song was more contemporary to my youth than Prince music was. Because Batman came out in 89, so I was only like 5 years old. So so when I would watch that in later years, that wouldn't seem contemporary to me in a way that like Super Freak would. So
well, also the song that plays in the party that gets more of a feature, it starts when Selena descends the stairs. It's a song called Face to Face by Susie and the Banshees, and it was co-written by Danny Elfman. And it's one of my favorite songs, like ever. It's on so many of my playlists because the combination of Susie Sue and Danny Elfman is just a musical genius, first of all. But the song is called Face to Face, and literally about the thing I was talking about before with what Batman and Catwoman's internal struggle is. What is my face? Who am I? And we're both figuring this out together. Which version of each other do we love? And which version of ourselves is really ourselves? And this scene is them realizing who the other one is. And, oh God, what do we do now? Are we supposed to start fighting? And the use of that song, it's so, like, first of all, if you don't know, Susie and the Banshees is like goth royalty. That is goth new wave music at its finest. And combined with Danny Elfman, he co-wrote the song so that it ties in with the score. And it has that violin. It's a synthesized violin, but it has violin.
Okay.
So it fits with the score.
Steven, that's fair. But, I was a kid. I didn't know when stuff came out.
That's my point, though, about how, yes, it came out in 1981, but in this movie in 1992, they're still playing Super Freak at the party. And now in 2021, are you telling me they don't still play Super Freak at company parties? I mean, when company parties happen, those are kind of a thing that don't happen anymore. But when they happen, like, Super Freak is one of those timeless, like, cheesy dance party songs that I think is always going to be around. So it doesn't necessarily date it. It doesn't tell you this is 1992. It tells you this is a cheesy company party. So that's the fact that it came out a decade earlier than the movie proves that point.
which by the way, and as I keep talking about Shrek. Eventually, we're going to get around to talking about him too. But I just love his moment there where he sneaks up behind Bruce and he's like, "Wonderful costume. Let me guess, trust fund goody goody." And
He's
then
such a
uh,
dick.
yeah, and then when
Yeah.
Wayne talks about you almost made a monster the mayor, and he's like, I'm the real power. It doesn't matter who's mayor.
Yeah.
And Bruce says it does to me, and he just goes yawn.
Yep. Yep. Which I'm not going to explicitly say it, but we know that there are plenty of political figures out there who would say things like that.
Yeah.
Like not just one, but several would say things
Mhm.
like that. And just showing the difference between who, again, the mask versus no mask thing, but Max Shrek has the mask in that moment. And he comes and he is his true self, his true ugly self to Bruce Wayne, but who he is up on the podium in the beginning of the movie when he's saying like, Santa Claus, afraid not, I'm just a poor schmo who got lucky. I wish I could, give unconditional love out to the world wrapped in a big bow. And like he does this whole BS speech about how he's so giving and kind, but that's his mask. Like everybody in this movie is like dealing with that who am I theme. And that's what a Batman story has to be about. Has to be about Batman dealing with who he is and where the mask really is and his own self-identity, and all of the villains representing that same idea. But this is the road you could have taken. Everybody is just one bad choice away from either being Batman or Max Shrek. So
yeah, I mean, yeah, and just and Shrek, of course, is like obviously, Penguin certainly is a villain because he does horrible things.
Yeah.
But Shrek is like, in my opinion, the villain of the film because Penguin is to a certain degree also a victim of his circumstances of what was done to him.
Mm-hmm.
And Shrek is just, just through and through evil. He's like, he knows what he's doing. He takes delight in it. He's going to use people.
But for all intents and purposes, Max Shrek has the life that Oswald could have had his parents kept him, because he was born into a wealthy socialite family, not also unlike Bruce Wayne. Bruce Wayne could have just as easily become a Max Shrek had he made different choices.
Yes, the answer is yes, Stephen.
Yes.
And brilliant creation.
He was manufactured for the film, but he was in the original script. Instead of Max Shrek, it was supposed to be Harvey Dent, played by Billy D. Williams, and he was going to become Two-Face. And they used a lot of his lines, a lot of Two-Face's lines. They kept in the script later on. They just turned it into Max Shrek instead. For whatever reason, they probably just because Warner Brothers came in and was like, hey, that's too many villain origins in one movie. Like, let's bring it down to two. We'll save Two-Face for the next movie. But the original script did not have Max Shrek. Instead, that character was supposed to be Harvey Dent. And they kept a lot of that dialogue. So that's what happened there. I still would have loved to see that, though. Billy D. Williams as Two-Face. Spicy opinion, but if instead of Batman Forever, we had gotten a Tim Burton Two-Face story with Billy D. Williams, can you imagine? That would have been so fire.
Yeah. There's no getting around it. It's sort of horrible when you look about the fact that, okay, you had Billy D. Williams as, Harvey Dent in the original Batman. And then 2 films later, we get Tommy Lee Jones as Two-Face, and there's no mistaking the difference there. So there's a bit of a, it always makes me a bit uncomfortable watching that.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, Warner Brothers said, Batman Returns type of movies don't sell Happy Meals. And we need to lighten it up and be the 60s again.
Oh, they lightened it up.
We need to, and respect where it's due, because you hate the game, not the player.
Yeah.
And
Oh yeah, no hard
The,
feelings
the
whatsoever.
money talks. Like, they needed to sell the Happy Meals and the toys, and they recognize, like, Batman Returns is not a kids movie. We need to make a Batman movie that's family friendly again. But also, the irony of the fact that they did what is essentially an homage to the 60s era of Batman. Batman Forever and Batman and Robin are directly meant to be homages to the Adam West era of Batman. And it does that very, very well. What it sets out to do, it fully does. And yeah, Batman Forever is a super fun movie. I'm down to watch it literally anytime. I already told you, I have the cups. I'm a fan, just not for the same reasons, just for the sake of, hey, this is fun. And I also recognize it for what it's for. Just like I feel the same way about the Adam West era. Like, I don't care for it, but I respect what it did and how, like, it's part of history now. It's part of the Batman history now, and it plays a role in the timeline. So we have to look at it for what it is.
Yeah, I was having this conversation about a week or so ago with somebody. Like, it kind of gets lost now because of because of Batman and Robin, but when
a much lesser movie than Batman Forever in
but
general.
when Batman Forever came out, it was a hit and people really liked the movie.
Yeah.
And I feel that gets lost nowadays. And so if you kind of just set it aside from, you know, the movies that came before and just focus on it as what it is, it's a ridiculously fun movie. You've got Jim Carrey at the height of his popularity when he basically ruled the world.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's just, and I love Val Kilmer and Nicole Kidman in it. I think they're great. And so yeah, I still put that in the column of movies that are fun. They're just, unfortunately, you know, you just are left
it breaks
wishing.
the continuity. It's just a separate continuity, and it's not a direct sequel. You have to consider it its own thing. And it makes you wish, as you said, it makes you wish we had also gotten the other continuity where Tim Burton continued his vision. But you know, to add to that, though, I will say, but it is nice and kind of refreshing when you have like one or two movies that are absolute gold and it didn't get tarnished by getting dragged on into a direction that sort of, you know, tarnishes the original beauty of the thing that you loved.
I was thinking about that also, because while on the one hand I'm like, God, it feels so infuriating that we didn't get that third Tim Burton Batman movie.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, there's no guarantee that it would have come off.
Because it still would have been Warner Brothers, and they are notorious for screwing up good ideas and making bad ones. Warner Brothers. Yeah, and we're not friends.
And plus, honestly, most of the time, third films don't come out well. There's absolutely exceptions, but most of the time, the creative juices start to either wear thin or there's studio interference, as you said. So in a way, like, now these two films definitely have their sort of immortal status as you know, classics of the genre, and this one in particular because it's such an insane vision.
Yeah. Well, they also definitively ended an era of the character of Batman and shifted it. Tim Burton definitively turned the character of Batman and Batman stories back into a dark direction again in comics. That, I mean, still, Batman is still seasoned by Tim Burton and Danny Elfman's influence and Michael Keaton's. To this day, we get iterations that objectively would not be what they are if not for what Tim Burton did. So from a pop culture perspective, you know, those two movies were enough to do what they did. And I personally, like, I think it's nice that even though, it would have been cool if we had gotten another one, if we could be guaranteed that it would be as good and have all the same kinds of magic that we appreciate about Batman Returns. But there's not any guarantee that that would have been the case.
Well, especially after Batman Returns, I don't foresee any scenario in which, because like Tim Burton was given surprisingly a lot of freedom with this film, which you can tell.
Because the first one succeeded so much and they didn't expect it to.
But after the response in certain corners to Batman Returns, I highly doubt that would have happened again. I think you would have seen the studio looking over his shoulder and saying, well, do you have to do this? You know,
well, they were trying to they would have tried to pressure him into doing what ultimately Batman Forever did, which was lighten it up. And you can't tell Tim Burton to lighten it up. That's how you get crap. Don't tell Tim Burton to lighten it up. You just let the man go. Let him do his thing, man. Disney, geez. To me, the two Burton Batman movies are classic Batman. Yeah, absolutely. To me, it's the two Tim Burton Batman, but also the animated series, which I think kind of fall under the same category. I mean, the animated series uses the Danny Elfman score as the theme song. It's so they knew what they were doing.
And again, what's so utterly brilliant about the use of that music for the animated series is the opening sequence doesn't even say Batman anywhere. It's just, it got that brilliant, animated sequence and the music, and then it ends with Batman up on the building with the lightning flash. And that's all you need to know.
What the moment where the title of the movie happens is when a bunch of bats fly out of the sewer, and it's not Batman. It's like, we're seeing the penguin, like his little carriage floating down the sewer, and we're getting all the opening titles as Danny Elfman's magical overture is happening, and then all the bats fly out of the cave and it says Batman Returns, and it's just nothing short of art. It is nothing short of art. It's magical. But we don't see Batman himself. It's not a story about Batman yet.
That's always such a strange moment to me too. It's brilliant, but like the opening of this movie just so consumes you, and you're like, this is just
la, 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 la.
Yeah, it's just such a weird, bizarre thing, and then all of a sudden the Batman music comes in, and you're like, oh, that's right, I'm watching a Batman movie.
So good. It's so good because it's so weird, and superhero movies don't take liberties like that anymore. It doesn't make weird choices like that where it's like, wait a minute, we had this whole opening sequence and it was just this dark fairy tale about this evil little baby. Like, you didn't show me the superhero yet. Where's my joke?
And just with how far this movie goes, another great moment that I love is when one of Penguin's henchmen, after Penguin, starts going on about how they're going to take the sleeping children of Gotham and drown them. And then one of his henchmen goes, Penguin, drowning
killing innocent babies. Isn't that a little, bam? No, it's a lot. So quotable. The script of this movie, there are so many quotes. So back in the days of MySpace, also aging myself a little bit here, but if you remember when you had your MySpace page and you had your headline, so like when you go to your profile, it would be like, here's your name, here's your picture, and here's your tagline. You could have a little slogan on your profile. I cannot tell you how many of my MySpace headlines were Batman Returns quotes, because I was like, yeah, that's my identity this week. It's like, adulation is a cross to bear, or tragic irony or poetic justice. You tell me. Oh my God.
When you quoted that line when we were talking on Messenger, I was like, okay, I've got to talk this movie with her, because she like gets the beauty of the bizarreness of this movie. And it's
my favorite Batman film, and I love a lot of Batman films, but this is the one that when I put it on and I hear the music and I see the colors, the color stories, just the visual look of it, the fact that it's one of the last movies that Warner Brothers or most studios did that was done like the old-fashioned way, with entirely soundstage built sets, and so much of the technique of how they made it, a lot of that is not used anymore. And the miniatures, there were miniatures that were used, and the puppetry, and very, very early CG that was only used like very sparingly for like a couple of things, like the batarang that like Holmes, and that when the camera is like doing the batarang thing, and then one part where the armor on the Batmobile comes on. Those are the only instances of CG in the whole movie. And the fact that all of the sets of Gotham City were constructed on sound stages and they were portable. So they literally would move these gigantic sets of Gotham City around from sound stages, and they used up like half of the Warner Brothers lot. And Michelle Pfeiffer talks a lot about how she would regularly get lost on set because she would come onto the set each day and different chunks of the set would be in a different part of the soundstage because they had to move it around so much. And like, when you look at the Gotham that they constructed here, how could they have, like, that's all on a soundstage? Are you freaking kidding me? Like, it's beautiful. It's stunning.
And that's the thing. Nowadays, there's the impulse to want to make everything seem as quote unquote realistic as possible.
Yeah.
But I love the look of this film. I just love the fact that, yes, I can tell it's on sound stages and backlots and all that, but like there's a charm to that I just instantly respond to and love.
I regularly quote Streetcar Named Desire and say, I don't want realism, I want magic.
Yeah.
But and sometimes, that's not a general rule for everything. I certainly think realism has its place. And again, I love the Christopher Nolan Batman films. I love them for what they are. They're groundbreaking in their own right, and I adore them. And I love a realistic take on Batman. But I love that we also have this absolute fairy tale of a Batman, where the world is literally constructed, everything in its entirety. The movie was filmed on location in Gotham City. I mean, is that really a contradiction from what I said? Like, the real Gotham City is Warner Brothers backlot.
Which it's funny because we were talking about my trip to LA, like what was now like 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. And one of the places that I know I did go to was in the Warner Brothers studio. So I actually got to go on a tour through the backlots at Warner Brothers. And actually I remember I took a picture they had like an indoor area with like different vehicles and stuff, and they had the Batmobile.
Yeah,
and
that's still there. You can still do that. It's wonderful. Southern California residents do it all the time still because it's great. It's awesome to do that. Going to the Warner Brothers backlot is like, I recommend it to everybody. It's wonderful, especially if you're a Batman fan, because you get to just drool over stuff. Like, my favorite Batmobile is this one from Batman Returns, 100%. Although I will say I also do really love the Batman Forever Batmobile. I love it a lot. But two of my favorite pieces of film that you can still go and see, they still exist physically, are the Batmobile from Batman Returns and the big rubber ducky that the Penguin rides in. I love that big duck. I love it so much. I love how absolutely insane it is. Like, it's so silly. Who built that? Who made that big ass duck?
Well, okay, like, let's just appreciate the whole like last 30 minutes of this movie.
What a third act.
It is so insane. You got
puppet penguins with rockets.
Like the insanity with which Danny Elfman is storing the sequences of those penguins just waddling around the streets of Gotham.
Yes, like absolutely destroy that brass, like all of the big heavy bassoons, like with the penguins on the rockets, and like Danny just goes off. Like, he understands. He's cut from the same cloth that Tim Burton is cut from, of like, oh, this is gonna be weird. I love it. Let's crank that to 11. Big rubber duckies, penguins with rockets. I am all over this. Like, and look at that production design. Look at that set. Are you telling me you don't want to get married there? Because I freaking do. Oh my God. Polar bear and all.
Like, this moment alone where all the penguins show up and you got, penguin, shouting out, "My babies!" It's just so beautifully insane.
Yeah. So another little fun factoid so there were some real penguins obviously you can tell which ones are real and which ones are puppets, but it's still great. I love when you can tell it's a puppet, because it reminds you that there's puppets in this movie, and I'm all about that. But there were some real penguins, and they specifically wanted to use king penguins, and they could only get them from like really far away. I don't remember exactly where anymore, but it was somewhere far away that they had to be like special shipped, these penguins, and they had like a penguin spa on the Warner Brothers backlot because they had to live in the exact perfect conditions. So for the time that they were staying there, they had like all this like water and ice and like replicated their like living conditions for them on the set. And when they were on set shooting, so many of the penguins got so like cozy that they would find them like napping with the puppet penguins. They would be like snuggling up with the puppet penguins. And that I was like, can I have some video of that, please? Like, that's gold. Like the fact that these penguins became homies with the puppet penguins. And it's just like, my heart. And then another animal factoid, the poodle, the lady who has the poodle. So that's not actually a poodle, it's a Bichon Frise, but that's a dog named Darla, who's been in many movies. It's the same. She played the pink poodle in I'm glad that warmed your heart, Kate. That dog was also in Pee-wee's Big Adventure. She was the pink poodle in Pee-wee's Big Adventure, but she was also Precious in Silence of the Lambs. So that's just hilarious to me that this dog is so prolific. And I think she was also in The Burbs with Tom Hanks.
Making the rounds in all the uplifting, heartwarming movies.
Yeah, but the fact that this dog was Precious in Silence of the Lambs and was in this like crucial scene, like this dog of the serial killer, and the whole put the lotion in the basket thing, and but then also in Batman Returns, and is the dog that literally catches a batarang out of the air. Amazing. Darla, A+. I love this dog.
which by the way, it's so like creepy with that woman who has the dog at the end of the movie when things start going badly for Penguin, and like all his followers start like slinking away, and she just steps back into the darkness and disappears.
Yeah.
Like, it's so beautiful.
Excellent. And that there's a story there with all of these the circus folk that become his henchmen, and because you only get like a smidgen of context from when Batman does his Bat Google search to find out that Penguin is actually, he was he didn't live in the sewer the whole time. He actually traveled around the circus and killed some kids and stole some babies.
And so there's just like, there's enough there that it sort of opens up your imagination to what that history could be. But at the same time, it doesn't spell it all out and say,
exactly,
this is what happened. It doesn't hold your hand.
Now we have to do this spin-off series that's all about this one little thing we told you about, because we can't have anything up to your imagination. We have to explain every little bit of context that there is and make sure we milk every single teat on this cow and give a series and a side story for every little character. I'm sick of that. Sometimes I like letting my imagination fill in the what ifs and think about all the possibilities of, I like that there's some mystery there. A lot of the time it's what you don't see and what you don't know that makes something terrifying or lovable or exciting.
Like I always like to say, if they were making Lord of the Rings these days, you couldn't have had Lord of the Rings until you had like a dozen solo films for each of the characters building up to that.
It's a great comedy video about that. Remind me to share with you after about if Marvel Studios, if Disney and Marvel had made Lord of the Rings, like how that would have turned out. But yeah, I like to poke fun. Again, I can't stress enough, I don't hate all the Marvel films. I really don't. I love Black Panther. I love Shang-Chi. Love the first Iron Man. I love the first Guardians of the Galaxy. But other than that, I've been told The Winter Soldier is good, but I haven't watched it yet. But I do like Sebastian Stan. He seems like a cool dude.
I will say, like, I maintain that my favorite of those Marvel films is the first Iron Man, because
Mhm.
it's got a freshness to it that
Yeah, well, it was fresh then.
yeah,
Totally.
exactly. But I will say, that being said, Winter Soldier is quite good. I'm not completely a fan of the way most of those films, the third act is lots of big CGI explosions and all that stuff,
Spectacle.
which that very much does have, but I do like what it's doing. It's such a good
Yeah.
political thriller
Yeah.
for
It's like
for
a
the
spy movie, right?
yeah,
Like, yeah.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
And
Everyone has told me I would like that one, and I will get there. I promise. I'll give it a chance. I always give a movie a chance before I hate on it, except for if Spider-Man's in it.
hey, I'm not the one who keeps bringing it up. Leave me alone. I'm throwing you to the wolves.
Okay. I'm only using it in context of what I love about Batman Returns, in conjunction with what I love about Batman Returns, what it illustrates to me, why I find that refreshing. So yeah, but yeah, you're right. That's not what this is about. But in terms of specifically in conjunction to that, or in opposition to that, with Batman Returns, I find that part of what makes it great is all of the context that is inferred. I miss inferred context. I wish more films now would use inferred context.
Yeah, I told you guys that what I kind of really liked about I mean, I liked a lot about Age of Resistance, but one of the things that I really liked, and some of this had to do with the fact that certain things were told in the YA novels, but I liked the fact that things happened off screen, and they didn't always, like, it was apparent what had happened, like when certain characters would re-enter the story and stuff, but you weren't privy to every corner of the story, and so you had to draw conclusions and stuff. I love that. Because again, it's not holding your hand and saying we're going to explain every single little beat to you.
Yeah. And again, hating the game, not the player, because what's working is working, and people are still, what people are paying for is what's going to keep getting made. So I get it. I've accepted the fact that I'm in the minority with what I dig about movies, and like what I wish more movies would do. Most people are always like, that's weird, I'm not into that. So that's fine. It's cool. I've accepted my edgelording. Forgive me, audience. I'm sorry. But go watch Batman Returns, though. All of this to say, watch Batman Returns. Just watch it. Especially now, Christmas time.
Yeah, it's just, that's the thing. And there's really nothing else like it. There hasn't been, since it came out, because it's even quite different from, even though it's a Tim Burton film and it shares many sensibilities, it's still actually quite different from the first Batman. And so, like, every time I watch it, I'm just like, oh my God, this is lunacy, pure lunacy, and I love every little bit of it.
Yeah.
It's
also Bob Kane, the actual creator of the character of Batman, was present on set for a lot of the creation of Batman Returns, and openly loved what Tim Burton was doing, and openly loved the dark direction that it took. And the little note that Batman has delivered to the Penguin that the monkey hands him, so that's actually Bob Kane's handwriting. He handwrote that note that is in the movie. So it's been touched by the actual creator. Like, he approved of what was happening there. So they were doing something right, for sure. It wasn't just for the weird kids, but for the actual father of Batman.
Yeah, let's see. I had pulled out this. I was able to upload a GIF. I could not do this and not have put in a video clip of this, because this is the fact that this is in the movie is so, I'd crack up every time. The mistletoe scene.
Oh my goodness.
Where
the fact that she licks the nose is my favorite detail of that. Like, the fact that she doesn't just lick him, she licks the mask all the way up to the tip of the nose, which if you wanted to get really nerdy, you could say there's so much symbolism in that because she recognizes that the mask is his real face. So she's going to lick that too. And I choose to accept that.
And but then he licks his lips.
Oh yeah, because he's so into it. Yeah. He's into it. He's all the way into it.
Which is just, again, part of it is the beauty of this movie. Yeah. It's that it's a story about three messed up people who basically all want to get laid at the end of the day.
I mean, just look at Frollo in Hunchback of Notre Dame, the Disney version anyway. A lot of the time, you know, the root of the problem a lot of the time is sexual repression. So there's a lot to be said there that can make you go to weird places. So that's why it's important to have a healthy conversation about your sexuality, especially if you're going to put on a cape and go beat people up in the night. Figure out, you know, there you go. There she is. And listen, I'm straight as an arrow, but if Michelle Pfeiffer Catwoman licked my nose, I'd be like, yeah, all right. Go ahead.
Yeah, I've kept myself, you know, pretty restrained on this one. I did a stream about this film with my good friend and brother Stephen Stark over on Here Be Dragons, and there was a bit more to talk about the effect that Catwoman had on us as young boys, shall we say?
That's fair. Just know that came at a cost. She couldn't breathe or hear.
Yeah.
So respect where it's due. She literally got vacuum sucked into her suit and could not hear and had to be told not to yell her lines because she couldn't freaking hear because she essentially had a laminated head. But you know, it paid off. It worked. And I'm eternally grateful to Michelle Pfeiffer for what she's done there. And is it a comics accurate? Not really, but then it influenced comics after that. Then it became comics accurate. So,
and you'd be hard pressed to, like, you can't think of a more iconic Catwoman. Like, you know, it set the standard, and so I feel like every time a new iteration of the character comes out in whatever kind of story, it's like, well, how does it measure up to Michelle Pfeiffer?
We compare it in our minds. And you know, there are good things and bad things about doing that, but there are certain times when you can't help it and you recognize that you're doing it. And Bruce probably wanted Selena to use her whip on him. I mean, probably.
Yeah.
Are you telling me that the man who puts on tights and goes out into the night is not a little kinky? Please. Please. Although, fun fact number 847, the shoes in the costume that Michael Keaton wears in this movie, he's not actually wearing boots. He's literally wearing painted Air Jordans.
I think I remember hearing that.
Because after the first movie, that's another reason I think it really informs Michael Keaton's performance in the first one compared to Batman Returns. You can tell he's visibly uncomfortable in the bat suit in the first movie because it was kind of like a batsuit prototype compared to the second one. He literally couldn't turn his head. Like the whole thing was like one piece from ears to shoulders. And so you notice
he can't really do that in this one either. It becomes sort of part of I think that's subconsciously, that's kind of what I've always liked about this version of Batman is that when he turns, it's like his whole body moves.
It has to whoosh the cape.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so there's just some, like, I think that's why I've never warmed to the Batmans that have full mobility of their head because it was part of Batman.
It made him less human. Will appear less human. He became the symbol that strikes fear in the hearts of villains and criminals because he's supposed to be a symbol and not a human.
Yeah.
And so the fact that he moves in a way that's inhumanly, for sure. But he's either more used to it in Batman Returns, so he has more of a feel for getting around, or maybe they made it more flexible. One of those two things is happening because he's clearly more comfortable. He's having more fun, but the shoes probably played a big role.
Also, it's clearly just rubber since he pulls it off so easily.
Oh my goodness! literally looks like cheese when he does that. Am I the only one who starts craving string cheese immediately after watching that movie? Because it peels in a way that looks just like mozzarella. And maybe that's just my inner chunky girl, which I'm very proud of. But I swear in that moment, they used a cheese cowl. And that's that's my headcanon.
Which, by the way, like, how great of a moment is that? Because he's giving this whole speech, and you got her saying, "I would love to go live with you in your castle, just like in a fairy tale, but I just don't think I could live with myself." And you know, and it's just such a, it's so great. And then the whole thing with the, you know, electrocution and, you know, give me a kiss, Santa Claus. And
Anti-Claus.
Anti-Claus. Is that
yeah, because think about it, because it ties in with his speech, Max Schreck's speech at the beginning of the movie, where he talks about how he gets compared to Santa Claus, and he says, "Santa Claus, afraid not." Like, and then she calls him Anti-Claus at the end. So it's got that whole, it's so good. The fact that she uses his own speech, the speech that, you know, again, so nerdy, but at the beginning of the movie, when he makes that speech, there's the whole thing where he's looking for his actual like written speech. And he says, remind me to, when he can't find it, remind me to take this out on Selena later. So the fact that his improvised speech there is essentially her fault. And then later on, she uses that against him to call him Anti-Claus. It's like one of those nerdy little things you probably don't pick up on until you've seen the movie a million times like I have. But I love that. I love that she sticks him, like, she's like, I know who you really are. Like, I'm aware of who you are under the mask. You can't fool me, and I'm gonna friggin' kill you.
And it is probably one of the most, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Satisfactory deaths ever, because you get that great moment where she gets her revenge, and then afterward you see he's just this, you know,
kind of looks like Large Marge. After he's been all fried and he's looking all like, it is very, that's a classic Tim Burton corpse right there.
Yeah, it reminds me of the first Batman film when Joker, you know, electrocutes, you know, one of the mob guys.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, absolutely.
Which is another great scene.
Awesome moment. Awesome moment. Also, one of my other favorite parts in Batman Returns is when Selena, as Selena, she quotes the Joker from the first movie when he asks her if she's going to go to the tree lighting thing, and she says, "Yeah, it's going to be a hot night on the cold town tonight," and that's literally what the Joker, like, he says, he sings that actually in the first movie, and Bruce like picks up on that, and that's what causes him to say, like, you've got kind of a dark side, don't you? Well, no darker than yours, Bruce. And you're like, oh, the chemistry, the undertones, the reading between the lines, the subtext. It's wonderful. The relationship between them and their dialogue back and forth, and the sort of seeing them both play literally the same game with each other and not know the other one is doing it. And the fact that their guard kind of comes down when they're together. Like, from the first time that Bruce Wayne meets her, like, as Bruce, their second meet cute, but the first time he meets her as Bruce Wayne, he fumbles and he becomes like genuinely awkward.
Yeah.
Because she calls him out. She exposes him. She makes him feel like, I see that you have a mask on. Like, he doesn't know why, but he gets the feeling that she gets him and he can't bullshit her. And so becomes this bumbling corn dog in her presence. And, I mistook me for someone else. And like literally almost exposes himself as Batman by saying, we met. Like, he forgets that she doesn't know he's Batman because he feels like she sees him for who she is. That's so much subtext. So much. The amount of subtext in this movie is not talked about enough. And there's a lot. In particular, the dialogue between Selena and Bruce is just magical writing.
It's what keeps this film so interesting because yeah, it's wonderfully bizarre and freaky and all that stuff, but there's just so much wonderful material,
Mm-hmm.
with the the duality of all the characters
Yeah.
and delving into their psyches and all this stuff. It just makes it endlessly fascinating
Yeah.
to watch every time I see this film.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's
And comparing it to Batman Forever also, and again, can't stress it enough. I love Batman Forever for what it is. But one of the ways that, they kind of, I want to say dumbed it down, but there isn't really a less dick way to say it, but kind of dumbed it down from Batman Returns, in that they kind of took away that subtext aspect of like the way that they're playing the psychological games. And they're like, let's write Bruce Wayne a romantic interest that's literally a psychiatrist and have her like explicitly be like, her entire character is just the fact that she's horny for Batman and trying to psychoanalyze him and directly talk about his duality, not in subtext anymore, but blanketly, like explicitly talk about his duality instead of putting it in subtext. It's just another sort of juxtaposition there. Like, and it works for the campiness of Batman Forever, but I think it's just great. It's so different from how Batman Returns does it.
Which I always found that hilarious, that the whole notion of Batman Forever was to move away from this sort of, like the really out there elements of this movie and the hyper sexualized, nature of like Catwoman and stuff. And then you've got Batman Forever, and which features probably like the scene where the most like overt, I'll just say it, horniness is expressed, where Nicole Kidman's character Chase is just so coming on to Batman.
I summoned you here with the bat signal specifically for a booty call. Like, okay, do I respect it? Kind of. But also, what a gross abuse of power. You literally just turned on the bat signal, which the entire city can see, and that says, oh, there's a crime afoot. No, this lady just, she needs the BD.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I just, it's like, yeah, you guys really aren't moving, in as much of a different direction.
They just needed to make it funnier.
Yeah, it was, the whole point was to make it lighter, but but we're still gonna play up the sexuality.
Chase Meridian, bonk, go to horny jail.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. Is there anything else that you want to focus on? Because I mean, there's tons to talk about with this movie, but is there anything we didn't touch on that?
I mean, we could get into how so much of the influence for Tim Burton, like how he wanted to do callbacks to German expressionism, and how so much of the costume design was based on the cabinet of Dr. Caligari. And Max Schreck is literally named after the actor who played Nosferatu in the original black and white movie, and how the architecture of Gotham City is based on early German expressionism, and how friggin' beautiful that is, and how that contributes to how like otherworldly fairy tale this feels, and the timelessness of it, in that it feels like it's older than it is, in the same way that a fairy tale does. Like, I wish, I want Tim Burton to do another movie where the studios just back up and let him do his thing again, because I feel as though the criticism that Tim Burton gets in the last decade is, while I understand why it exists, I think the source of the problem is not so much that Tim is making mistakes. It's more that the studios have a lot of control there, and they don't just kind of let him do his thing anymore. It's always a partnership with a bigger name, like, Disney, or let's make this thing based on something else. They don't just let him kind of go nuts.
Well, I mean, even like going back to, for instance, the Hobbit films, like, when those were being made, that was like the Lord of the Rings was made under New Line before Warner Brothers bought New Line, and partly because of what kind of like you know, the people that were running New Line, and partly because it was sort of uncharted territory, it was a fairly hands-off kind of project. They're always calling Lord of the Rings like the most expensive independent movie ever made.
Yeah.
And The Hobbit was completely different because New Line was now owned by Warner Brothers,
Yep.
and also MGM was involved in everything. And so there was so much oversight on those films, and the executives actually knew where New Zealand was now.
As do we all.
Yeah. So it, again, that goes to show you, like, the more studio interference there is, like, that's going to filter into the eventual product, which is why, part of the reason why the Hobbit films are sort of what they are and not as well loved as Lord of the Rings, because they're not as much a pure expression, I think, of what Peter Jackson probably wanted to deliver, like he did with Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
And so the same thing is true with a lot of bigger budget films these days, not just comic book films, but just overall. That's why the exciting projects are the ones being made by studios like A24 and places like that, where they allow filmmakers to just, have their vision and go crazy. And
I will say, I think that Denis Villeneuve, I don't remember how to say it. Forgive me, I'm much too American, Californian specifically. What he does with his films, I feel like he's still in that sweet spot that Tim Burton was once upon a time, where the studios are like, okay, what you're doing is working. Let's let you do it for a bit.
I don't know how he's getting away with it. I really don't.
Because it's early enough. It's early enough, and the things that he's done have been successful enough that they're trusting in it, because those of us who love what he's doing, there's enough of us. And we're loud. And so he's still in that sweet spot where he's got the studio trust, and they don't feel the need to get insecure and mess with it yet. But that time will come. I guarantee you that he will have a movie soon where you're like, this doesn't feel quite like him anymore. It'll happen. I hate that I'm that cynical, but it's the nature of the game. And
but I will say I'll still be grateful for the fact that, stuff we've gotten from him, like Sicario, Arrival, Blade Runner 2049, and now Dune.
Dune is, I'm so glad it's doing as well as it did. I'm so glad that finally the masses are, not finally, I swear, I'm not always,
I was surprised,
edgelord, but the fact that it's, from a mainstream perspective, vastly successful, and everyone just sort of universally loving it, and it's weird. And I'm like, see, there we go. Like, Dune should be showing studios that it's okay to get weird. See, you can still make a butt ton of money and get a bunch of people in the seats if you get weird. It's possible.
Like I was just super grateful because we're going to get the second part. So because I was very doubtful, because I remember after Blade Runner 2049 came out, and I was just so in love with that film, and it was heartbreaking to see that, it really lived up to the legacy of the original Blade Runner. In that it didn't do well financially, but so I was glad to see that Dune did really well, and so at least we'll get the rest of that story. And
fingers crossed that he's still in that sweet spot of trust, that they let him just continue on the path that he was already on. Don't try to mess with it. It's fine. Let him keep going. Don't try to get in there and change it up. It's great. But and I feel that spot that he's in now, Tim Burton was absolutely in that spot here with Batman Returns. It's that place where he was allowed to go with his instincts and his choices. And obviously he wasn't allowed to do everything he wanted, because otherwise we would have still had, Robin and Harvey Dent and like a whole bunch more happening in the movie. Like there's always compromises that need to be made when you get a film from the first draft to the screen. But in terms of things that were compromised, like his vision, his tone, his flavor, that is just undeniably him, that didn't get compromised. And I I miss that era when great artists could more regularly be allowed to do that. I hope we go through another phase like that soon. It would be really awesome. And that's why I love Tim Burton movies in general so much, because I even feel like even his worst work is still, it still takes me somewhere I enjoyed going. 99.9% of the time, it still takes me to another place that kind of feels like home to me, because I've always just loved his vision so much from the time that I was an infant. Like, I literally have no memory of not knowing and loving Tim Burton movies and Danny Elfman music, because it was already happening all around me when I was born. You know, Edward Scissorhands came out the year I was born. And it's one of the first movies I remember seeing ever. Edward Scissorhands and Beetlejuice and Batman Returns are three, and the first Batman are like the first movies I have actual memory of seeing as toddlers, and just the music. And my mom was a massive Oingo Boingo fan before I was born. And so I literally came into this world surrounded by Danny Elfman music. And so even at his worst, I'm going to go see a Tim Burton movie. I'm going to give it a chance. But Batman Returns to me is like, that's one of just the finest. It's one of the finest because it walks that balance of like, here's your Tim Burton nerdiness being met, but also here's your Batman nerdiness being met, and challenging all the things about movies now that we feel like we have to adhere to, and kind of flying in the face of them. So I love Batman Returns forever. Merry Christmas to Batman Returns.
Yeah, which, by the way, as we talk about the music one more at a time, I always have to show off my physical media to everybody. So, like, I do have this special. It's got the score to both Batman and Batman Returns. It's the Batman Danny Elfman collection.
Magical.
Yeah, it's just beautiful music. So
I need that. I have all of those things in digital form, but I've been keeping my eye out for the physical version of that to have on display, because I want it.
Yeah, I'm gonna look it up for you, because I know, I'm not sure how long ago it was. I know there was like a low stock alert on the website that sells it. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure if they fully sold out or not, but I'll look into that for you and see if it's still available. And
thanks, friend. Thanks.
Yeah, but yeah. So I think we'll wind down. This is just, again, like a beautiful, twisted, glorious piece of cinema that I have loved since I was a kid. And there was always, like, even though I remember loving the first Batman, I remember seeing this and just being like, there's something so perfectly executed about this. Like, every level of it was just, you know, incredibly well made, super sleek, everything about it. It just, I knew it was a great piece of cinema, like, when I saw it, and I've never stopped loving it. And I was really happy when just in the past couple of years it was remastered in 4K and all that, because I've kind of felt like, and Batman the Animated Series was put out on Blu-ray too. So at that point, I remember saying to myself, you know what, they can do whatever they want with Batman. And if I don't love the new stuff, that's fine, because I've got these beautiful, wonderful editions of these movies and the show. And so, like, I'm happy. Those are always going to be there for me to go and enjoy.
Yeah, I 1,000% agree. Like, no matter what comes out from here on out, they can't take away the amazing things that already exist. And we can always turn back to them for comfort. Anytime we feel edgelordy about anything else, we can be like, oh, always have Michael Keaton. And Kevin Conroy.
Okay, so and I'm gonna go ahead and stop there. If honestly, there's so much to this movie, and I'm sure plenty we didn't get to. If any of you watching this haven't already seen it and you want to hear me talk more about Batman Returns, go over to Here Be Dragons, because I had a wonderful conversation some time back, with Steven, where we did sort of a more, I think we went through, like, I don't know if it was chronological, but I feel like we went through the beats of the movie a bit more.
Like step by step.
Whereas on this one, I think we just decided let's gush about all
Veered
the
off
different
into
stuff we love.
nerdiness.
Yeah, which I love. That's great. And so yeah, next week, and I'll be doing a special stream on Wednesday instead of Saturday. So Wednesday the 22nd, both hosts of Cinematic Realms will be here. Amy will be joining me. We'll be talking about Love Actually.
Awesome.
And then tomorrow on Here Be Dragons at 6 p.m. Eastern, the 20th anniversary celebration of the Fellowship of the Ring. It'll be me, Stephen, Kelly, and Dan. So please join us for that. And go ahead, Sydney, say once more what you guys have going on over at Trial by Stone and where people can find you.
darkcrystalpodcast.com has all the other links you might need for our blog, our YouTube, where to stream our podcast, all of the most recent episodes. We have a new audio commentary. Find me on Instagram, Black Star Far Dreamer. You can follow Trial by Stone on everything. But once again, if you go to darkcrystalpodcast.com, all that stuff is going to be linked on there. And then keep an eye out for me again here at some point. I'm sure I'll always be happy to come back here. And when my YouTube channel is unveiled, it will likely be January or February after I come back from my Christmas break and have my new setup in my new apartment in the new year. And yeah, there's lots of stuff. And I promise it will not all be hating on Marvel. That is not my entire identity. We just veered off there today because I thought it was relevant in the moment, but that's not all I do. And I can hold it in a lot of the time. It's not that heavy on my mind. I talk about fantasy movies a lot. So,
well, when it came up in one of our early chats, when we first started talking, I was like, that's going to come up at some point. And yeah. I was like, I remember being like, tread carefully.
Yeah. I can hold it back. I can hold it back. It felt right when talking about Batman Returns.
I want to say, like, I am so really psyched hearing that you're going to be starting that YouTube channel, and I can't wait to watch some of that stuff. So I'm really looking forward to it.
I'm very excited about a lot of the ideas that I have, and I hope other people are too. It's very likely that the first video will be pertaining to Dark Crystal, so that I can, wrangle over the fan base that I already have to come join me on my other adventure too. Because I want to bridge that gap and be like, hey guys, we still talk about Dark Crystal here. It's just we also talk about a lot of other stuff too. But yeah, so I'm really excited to get that started. So look for that in the coming 2022.
Excellent.
Big new chapter ahead.
And you guys can find all the links that Sydney was talking about in the description. I went ahead and plugged those in there. So go ahead and give her a follow on Instagram and follow, Trial by Stone on Twitter and all the usual places. And thank you all for watching. Sydney, this was just the most fun. I love getting to talk with you about this movie, and it was such a pleasure.
I did just think of one more thing. I knew there was going to be one more thing as a big doofus. River Horse Games just came out with the Dark Crystal tabletop RPG. It's out now, and I contributed. I was a guest writer on the book for the tabletop RPG for Dark Crystal, and you can get that at River Horse Games. But it's on shelves now. So if you go to game stores and bookstores, look for the Dark Crystal RPG, the Dark Crystal adventure game. If you're into D&D, tabletop RPGs, and or the Dark Crystal, I'm a featured writer for the RPG. So go buy that if you play games.
Go buy that, guys.
Yeah.
And at that moment, Phil was like, "Oh, thank God!"
Yeah, I was like, "I know there's something." I'm just in Batman mode. Yeah. Sorry, Phil. Sorry that took so long, everybody. There it is. I'm a mess. Good luck on my YouTube channel, guys.
I still don't always remember everything, but I remember especially in my early streams, I kept forgetting like the most basic stuff, and I'd finish off a stream, just like talking about my stuff, and then it'd be like, oh yeah, my guest has stuff to plug. Never mind.
Yeah.
We'll just go. And it's like, oh, sorry.
I literally just relocated 600 miles this week. Cut my brain some slack, guys.
Well, thank you once again, everybody, for tuning in, and thank you, Sydney. And yeah, I hope you don't mind. I will probably be trying to sucker you into coming back on sometime soon.
Please.
For another
It's
talk.
always fun. I will always try. I will always say yes and try. Yeah.
All right. Well, have a wonderful night, everybody, and I think I'll be seeing some of you on the Zoom that we're going to be doing after this. So, have a great night, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.